on?
Audio is on.
Hey. Right, that was not asking you to unmute.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we've hit 4 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 8th Regional Board Meeting. And I want to recognize that we're holding the meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. Do we have any changes to said agenda?
Thank you, Chair. It's come to my attention that we included Chair's report and Director's reports on this agenda, but we don't do that at this meeting. We do that at the next.
Okay.
And I did just want to explain the weighted vote for 15.1, but I could do that at the time.
Sure.
It says weighted vote, but the bylaw, so I'll do it at the time.
You do it at the time. Yeah. Okay. So no changes to the agenda. Can I get somebody to move the agenda?
So moved as modified.
Thank you, Director Falls. Second by Director Southcott. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to the adoption of the minutes of the March 26, 2025 meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing no hands. And I apologize. We have a number of people on the screens today. So if I don't see a hand, or I don't notice you, please speak up. So if there are no errors or omissions, would anybody like to move the minutes?
So moved.
Director Southcott, Director Gisborne, all in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. We have quite a few delegations, it would appear, this meeting, which is not really common, but let's move on to the first one, Staff Sergeant E. Dyson. For coming today, Staff Sergeant.
Good afternoon.
I'm sure. Why don't we do introduction since we're here? I mean, you go ahead first and then we'll pass it around.
I'm Lee Dyson. I'm the newly appointed detachment commander for the Powell River and Texada Island RCMP.
Great, thanks. Let's go up to the board. Jason.
Thanks, Chair. Jason Lennox. I'm the director in Area A. That's north of Tla'amin, all the way up Sabre Island, Hernando, and into Desolation Sound.
Director Gisborne.
Hello, I'm Director Mark Gisborne. Oh, wait. Hello?
Yeah,
there we go. Hello, I'm Director Mark Gisborne from Electoral Area B, and that is just east of the municipality, Paradise Valley, Myrtle Rocks, all the way out to Wayland Road. Thank you very much.
Director Fall.
Hello, I'm Andrew Fall from Lasqueti Island. That's Electoral Area E.
And Director McCormick.
Hi, I'm Sandy McCormick, Director for Area D, Texada Island.
Let's go over here, Rob.
Municipal Director.
And Clay Grander, we've met.
Cindy Elliott, City Councilor, and here I am the Municipal Director for the City of Powell River.
Awesome. So, welcome. I understand you're giving us a quarterly report.
Quarterly report and the final report for the last year. You will have heard some of this before.
It happens.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just sort of for total numbers, in the fourth quarter, our office responded to 488 calls for service, which is a little bit down from the same quarter last year. Overall, we had 6,700 calls for service last year, which is down from the year before.
No,
sorry. I hit the wrong button here.
So just that you said it was down, but it's actually
my apologies. It was up a little. I was already thinking about this year where we're down. This year we're down from the year before.
Okay.
So just going over sort of some of our more common calls for service, the check well-being calls were decreased from the year before from 60 to 42. Overall year over, they were up by 6% for the entire year. Do you want, I mean, you can see the numbers. Should I go over the actual numbers themselves or just the increase or decrease? Is it
you, I guess?
Mental Health Act calls, which tend to be a large number of our calls. And so these last couple of calls for service are just the calls that are in the provincial area or the regional district area, not within the city of Powell.
Good to know.
For the fourth quarter, Mental Health Act calls were 18, so they were down from the year before. And overall for the year, there was a decrease, which is always a good sign, by 37% from 2023. Unspecified assistance, which is calls that don't fall under any other general criminal code or other file type. Those were down again for the fourth quarter of 2024 from the year prior. And the same thing for overall year to year, down 22% decrease from the year prior. Missing persons were an increase of 50%, but that doesn't say much when it goes from 3 to 2, or from 2 to 3, sorry. And the same thing year over went from 12 to 13, so a minor increase year over. Persons crimes, so utter threats, things of that nature, does not include assaults. Those were up slightly, 15% increase for the quarter, and a little bit more, 11% increase year over as well. Assaults, which somewhat self-explanatory, those were up by 35% for the quarter, and roughly the same for the overall year to year. Extortions went from 2 in 2023 to 0, which is good to see, and a significant drop. So I don't know what in 2023 was going on. Typically that will, one person can create that if they're going around doing a bit of a spurt. Sexual offenses for the quarter remain the same at 5. And for year to year, dropped by 1, so not a huge change. Harassment calls for service, again for the fourth quarter, remained static at 6 and up by 1 year old. Uttering threats calls, which are sort of a piece of that other one, or could be depending on how they're scored. The difference can be how the member scores the file once they've actually read it, whether it meets an actual uttering threats or not. For 2024, there was an increase, a 25% increase from 12 to 15. For the year, a fairly big increase from 36 to 55 year over. Property crime offenses, which tend to be sort of one of the higher numbers that we deal with. An increase for the quarter of 44%, but a minor increase year over. So hard to know exactly what the reason for that little spike in the last quarter was. I do know that for the last several months there have been some of our property crime. So it could be that this was just before they went in. Overall, that's overall property crime. Bike thefts, pretty small, not a major issue for us here. Although there were only 3 for the entire year last year.
That's outside the city?
That is outside the city. Yep. Theft unders. So theft under $5,000, that's sort of based on an assessment of the member as to where that dollar figure lands, whether it's over or under. For the fourth quarter of 2024, we have a significant increase from 17 to 9, from 9 to 17, my apologies. And for the year, there was an increase of 23%. I do know that one of our sort of major shoplifting offenders is currently out of town, has several warrants, and may not come back as a result of that. So that could be helpful for us. And I know that she is active sort of in the city and within the other regions as well. Shoplifting, got 3 for the entire year. Theft from vehicle, increased from 0 to 2 for the quarter, but a decrease overall, from 7 to 4 for the entire year. Again, these are for not within the city proper. Theft of vehicle, where the entire vehicle is taken. Fourth quarter was pretty static there, but overall we've had a reduction of 54% from 7 to 4 year over.
Is this the same person steal their neighbor's car at the same time every year or something?
Could be. I don't know in this case, if we determined who that person was. I'm not up to date on that.
Okay.
Good question though. Frauds, which tend to sort of be somewhat cyclical. For the fourth quarter, we have an increase of 1, but year over there is a decrease of 31% from 33 to 24. Mischief, which can be anything from, these numbers are a little bit misleading, in that mischief can be anything from spray painting on a wall to somebody being in a vestibule that they are not wanting to be in, asked to leave and they don't. So it can be a little bit of an odd thing, but here we have an increase of 64% from 25 to 41 for the quarter, and an increase of 5%. This can also be, there have been some changes in the coding matrix, and that could have resulted in a little bit of the change as well, if things have been changed. And I am not a coding expert at all, so I can't explain that really clear, but I do know that could have an effect on some of your numbers. Drug offenses, from 0 to 3 for the quarter and from 2 to 4. That can have a little bit of a change based on the change of the provincial position on possession of drugs. Could have some effect on those particular numbers. Drug trafficking, again, only 1. That would be depend on the way the drugs are packaged when they're seized. I know that we recently had a fairly large seizure, but the seizure was turned in by an ex-girlfriend, so it was 100% for court purposes. Use it for charges against the person that we knew was doing it, but we can't, beyond a reasonable doubt, prove that. Weapons offenses, luckily, were down for the quarter and down for the year over by 86%, which is good to see. Overall calls for service, this is for the entire detachment, just shows the sort of cyclical nature of some of those. Like I said, for this year, we're down a little over 100 for the same period last year, so it looks like we're trending in a downward rate here for our detachment for this year. We'll see what happens when the tourists arrive, if that changes anything for us. So the different calls for the different areas, for the other directors, you can see sort of who was the biggest calls for service in 2024. Seemed to be the South. Savory had a few more, and as you know, we had a file over there a couple days ago that was involved some work and phenomenal work by the fire department there that I can't say good enough about. The members that were on scene were, again, couldn't say enough good about the group over there and how well they did under very trying circumstances. Just a couple of interesting files to note. There was a break and enter beanie in progress, and when they got there, they found a very agitated individual that was there. Unfortunately, when the members tried to arrest him, he became combative, and a conductive energy weapon or a taser was deployed in order to take him into custody, and that matter is still before the courts. Another one down south was a careless use of firearms. There was a report of a number of shots heard. We used as many members as we could get down there. We found him, he was arrested, and a search warrant was executed, which found a number of firearms that were seized as evidence that were stored in various different states. He was held in custody for bail hearing, and he's pled guilty and has a 2-year firearm prohibition as of now. Situation table has been established and has been working well. One of our members here is very engaged in that process and seems to be working well. They've engaged a number of people through that process. I don't know particularly how many have been within the city and how many have been in the district, but I do know that at least one was in the district and received some help, was living in conditions that we needed to address. The fraud awareness, particularly with our elderly, we've done a couple of presentations at the Jerry Gray Place and at the Cranberry Senior Center, which were well received and well attended. Again, Constable Paula Perry, our community policing member, did those and has a very good relationship with the groups at those two locations. She also attends regularly at Jerry Gray Place here in town. And has a good relationship with them and has been able to head off some issues both from within and without the city proper to try to get some stuff off that gets brought up to her. Restorative justice program organized and developed. Restorative justice program, was organized and came up with some issues. They're been engaged with a women's soccer group and some online safety presentations. What's coming up in the future? We are scheduled to receive our rollout for the body worn cameras in June of 2025. Up until now, the rollout has been going well and seems to be on time. So it looks like that will be when we will receive them. We're having a new cadet coming from Depot. He graduates at the end of May and will be here in place in June. I spoke to him yesterday. Our general investigation section, which was collapsed of a number of years ago, has been being rebuilt. It had a corporal, and just recently one constable has been assigned to that unit, so they now have 2 and can do a little bit more work that way. The Island District Emergency Response Team is going full-time later here in the spring. We have a member in Powell River who is transferring to that team. So we will have a vacancy that we are already actively working on trying to fill. And we've just got a new police car. It's actually parked outside right now. We have another one here in town that's scheduled to be replaced, and then one of the Texada PCs was scheduled to be replaced later this year. However, it just got damaged, so that will likely happen sooner than we had scheduled. So that was one of my tasks to deal with yesterday. And that's all I have for sort of the formal presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And
sure. Thanks very much for the presentation. I imagine some of our directors will. I just want to ask you, you've been here for what, about a month now or so?
2 months.
2 months now?
Yes.
How is the transition going?
It's going very well. This is a beautiful part of the world to live in, and happy to be here. It seems like we have a really, really good crew that are super engaged. They've been running short for a little while, and it's, they're giving it everything they have, and it'll be nice to get the new cadet in and hopefully a new member shortly.
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear it's going well. I'm going to open it up.
Director Lennox and Director Gisborne have their hands up.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Director, we'll go Lennox, Gisborne, and McCormick.
Great, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Sergeant Dyson, for your presentation. Always interesting to see the stats. Since you brought it up, I do want to take a moment to thank your members for their service on Savory on the weekend. And the people over there. I've got some questions for you. Specifically, how can we support local initiatives like the Savory Long Weekend coverage and maybe some of the other things that put a little extra burden on your membership but are very valuable to the community? maybe hopefully that some of those things have been passed on to you, and if there's anything we can do to kind of get ahead of it and support that before summer hits and those types of things. Any
Yeah,
ideas?
absolutely. We have sort of a summer policing program. I haven't looked into it super deep as to how that works. There's some funding that comes with that. And I know that Savory Island has been brought up as one of sort of the key places where it goes from 100 people year round to a huge increase, and obviously policing is a challenge for that. So I haven't looked directly at that one yet, but it is on my radar as something to look at sooner rather than later so that we're prepared for when the masses arrive on Savory.
Great. And just a follow up here around the stats, your calls for service obviously don't equal actually the number of convictions that would be seen in the community and in the different categories. Those are literally just calls for service. Am I correct?
Correct.
And so building on that, is there any maybe plans with the RCMP to heat map the different areas in the region or any region for that matter, and really allow us to maybe you've already done this, target specific areas in the community that are kind of more frequent flyers or have a higher call volume?
Yeah, so we work with our crime analysts fairly regularly to do exactly that, where they will take our stats and determine if there's a specific area or and sometimes you can get that right down to a specific person based on the area as well. So yeah, it is something that we do. I don't know when it was last done here, but I will be engaging with our district crime analyst to do exactly that and determine, just so that we can make sure we're working where we need to work. It's one thing to be all over the place, but you may not be as successful there. Whereas if you know where there might be a specific problem, then you can address that more directly.
Thank you.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you. And thank you, Sergeant Dyson, for coming in today. My questions pertain to out in Area B, we're seeing an increased number of squatting, like folks in RVs and motorhomes and things like that. And I've been, some folks have been saying, oh, it's an RCMP issue. Some folks say, okay, it might be with the ministry because we've had, I believe, an incident out by Duck Lake. And as I'm currently aware, I believe there's two right up by Paradise Exhibition Park, which I believe are on what used to be called Brookfield's Power property, which goes from Lois Lake all the way to the town site. So I'm just wondering, like, when I get these calls, should they be calling you, or like how is that best dealt with?
It tends to be dealt with on a sort of circumstance basis, because it depends on whether they're in a public area, whether they're in a private area, and what they're actually doing. So it could be, like I discussed earlier, a mischief thing where they need to be told to move along. If they're in an area where it's public, it's difficult to tell them to move along, especially with the current situation with the lack of a shelter. So the province has there's a bit of an issue within the province where the courts have said that if there's nowhere for them to go, you can't legally on public property, in many circumstances, move them along unless you have a place you can direct them. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern right now while we wait for some interim solutions to that. But we have been called several times to go and address some of these issues. I know the gentleman that was out at Duck Lake that had some challenges. I think he's moved into town now. He's over by the complex. But I think his equipment is still out there as far as I know.
Yeah, and that's the main concern I hear is, when people start making a mess, because there is cases where folks are parked publicly, they're in a motorhome, but it looks like just a vehicle's parked there. But yeah, it's when they start, making a detriment to the area.
Yeah, and I think that seems to be the case with the two under the power line. That just looks like a motorhome parked there. And I was up by the one on Duck Lake just the other day. So, I mean, that becomes an environmental ministry issue, forestry, as well as us. If they're just there and they're not committing any actual offense, then there's not much that we can do. Although we can be assistant in a process with other agencies to help address that. But again, without some place would be to send them, the options become somewhat limited.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's my question.
Okay, I just noticed we've gone over time. Is everybody happy that we continue? I assumed you would be. Okay, great. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Staff Sergeant, it's great to have you here. We are so appreciative on Texada Island of maintaining the staffing complement at our detachment. Our constables are very much needed and very appreciated. There was one incident, though, I guess it was around the time you arrived, it was about a month ago, on Texada, that involved the uttering of threats at our medical clinic. And our resident physician, who we're very lucky to have, who only just arrived a few months ago herself, was genuinely frightened. It took several hours for an officer to be able to respond. There was no one on island, I'm told, at the time of this incident. So I guess my question to you is, how do you, I know sometimes officers have to go off island for various things, but how can you maintain a staffing level so response can be a little faster than that? Because it's pretty frightening when you're on an island and, you turn to the RCMP and there's no one there.
Yeah, so I can tell you in that specific instance, there were members on island, they just weren't working. So it took a little bit of time. So what happens in a situation like that where there's no member working? In my previous posting, I was in the Outer Gulf Islands, so we have several islands there where there's no full-time police presence. So what would happen in a situation where there's no member working is the divisional duty officer will receive the information on that call, and they make an assessment based on what's received in the call as to whether there's a call out authorized or whether it can wait based on the totality. So I don't know what information that the duty officer at the time got, but there was a bit of a delay for that. It was brought to me shortly after we started to deal with the call, and then there were several phone calls back and forth between the members on Texada and myself to try to address this. And there was a member that went and immediately went and dealt with the subject, who was well known to them, and sort of, he has an ongoing mental health challenges that tend to ebb and flow, and obviously he was in one of those moments at the time. It was addressed. We thought it was handled sort of in the short term, and then there was some contact made with the doctor subsequent to that. I do know that about a week later, for whatever reason, and the interesting thing is that gentleman has never met that doctor, isn't a client at the clinic there. We don't really know why he chose to target her. There was some anecdotal reasons given as to why that may be, but I know that subsequently he was apprehended on the Mental Health Act and taken for assessment. I don't know where that stands right now, but I can tell you that there has never been a time that I'm aware of where there were no members on Texada. When a member is off at island, what we do is we have a member dedicated to be what's called operationally available in Powell River to be able to supplement the member that's over there who may be off duty but would still be on island.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That explains a lot. I'm still puzzled though, because at the recent Health Services Society meeting on Texada, I heard the doctor report out that it took several hours for police to respond. And you're saying someone responded immediately, so I'm not sure how to reconcile those two statements, but I'm not arguing with you. So.
Oh, no, let me just clarify. So the original call, because there was no member working, went to our district duty officer. There may have been a delay between the time that call made and it was actually downstream to us. I can't say how many, it may have been a number of hours, I don't know. But once we learned about it, there was some phone calls back and forth, and the member at that point knew the person who went directly to them. So you're 100% could be correct. I don't know what the time period was between the original call and the attendance to speak with him, and then subsequently talk to the doctor. And there would have been a delay because they went to the subject of that matter first before they went to the doctor.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Oh, Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Question about mental health act calls in your stats. Are the numbers all apprehensions, or is the category broader than that?
It's broader than that. That would be calls for service of a mental health nature. So the number that would have turned into an actual apprehension would have been significantly lower.
Go ahead.
Just following that up, in times past or in years past, there's been a lot of hours spent by police officers in the hospital emerge, monitoring patients before they could be admitted, basically then responsibility taken by the hospital. And in some cases, as I understand, continuing necessity for police officers. How much time is now being taken? Is that a concern, basically?
My understanding in talking to the members is that that locally has improved significantly, which is not a trend division or provincially. Apparently the work that has gone into building the relationship with the hospital has really improved that situation here. And I can tell you that in my last post, I sat at a hospital for 6 hours waiting for a clearly troubled individual to be seen. In that situation, we were hours away from our detachment, so had there been a call. But my understanding here is that it's gotten a lot better. I don't know the actual average time right now that they're waiting, but there has been an improvement from what I understand.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much. It's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, Director Elliott.
Thank you. I just became a bit curious about Lasqueti Island and what is different about it. And I noticed it's not part of your report, so somebody must take care of Lasqueti Island. And I just wondered how that happens.
So Lasqueti Island would be covered by members out of Powell River. So we would hop on the boat and go out there. Officially, it would be one of the provincial members that would go over there, but in reality, it's whoever's working that would be available would go over there.
And I assume your call volume is very low from Lasqueti Island?
My understanding is yes. I'm not super familiar with that, but yes, that's my understanding.
Oh. The director's going to tell me all about it.
I can clarify for a bit. So there's the RCMP branch in Parksville serves us, which is then the call number, I think, goes up to Courtney. So I think it's that detachment is who officially serves us, I believe. But that said, there are very few calls. I don't know if the RCMP visit Lasqueti more than once a year, unless something really serious happens. More or less, the RCMP don't come over, which works for both, and people are quite happy with that. But when they're needed, the RCMP are very good, and they come over. And there are boats. I think there are cases where emergency response will happen, but everyone understands there's no real emergency response. If someone calls, it's not going to be immediate. There's no helicopter coming or a jet boat. Although the RCMP might wish to have a jet boat, but I don't think there is one.
My apologies. I was thinking of the wrong island.
That's quite okay. Yeah. I believe
yes.
One of the RCMP officers in Parksville grew up on Lasqueti, so there's an understanding of the island quite well.
Yeah, Parksville, you are in Parksville's area, and yes, it's dispatched, as are we, out of Courtney Comox.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, seeing no other hands, I'll let you off the hook. Thanks very much for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Rogers. And we've got 5 minutes for the delegation. Is that correct? Awesome. Land Surveyor for Polaris Land Surveying Incorporated.
Hello again. I gotta start where is Mark? He looks like he's in the high Arctic or something.
No,
it's his barn.
There he is.
No, I'm at home in my commercial kitchen, and I feel like I'm coming down with something, hence why I'm wearing 2 coats, because I just feel cold.
Heat locker.
Yeah, okay. So down to business. I'm here regarding the Brew Bay development that we discussed at the planning committee a couple of weeks ago. And to be clear, on the upper portion, the 46th lot, Bearland Strata, And the intent of the presentation today is to encourage the board to send the application back to staff. Two reasons for this. One is procedural, and the other reason is it has to do with the land itself and the value of the land itself as park. So reason number one, the procedural question. The OCP, the current OCP, shows the lands adjacent to Lang Creek as park. It's to get to that designation, there was a previous amendment to the OCP that involved previous landowner, staff, board members, and the public. And all those entities contributed to that area being designated as park, those lands adjacent to Lang Creek in the OCP. When we look at the OCP, there's two principal reasons we have one. One is to guide staff to make decisions, and the other is for the public to look at what is local government going to expect from me if I'm going to develop this land. Right now, the OCP shows the lands adjacent to Lang Creek as creek. So the question regarding procedure has to do basically with Section 478 of the Local Government Act that states that once an official community plan is adopted, committees and board members must make decisions that are consistent with the OCP. So to reverse what the OCP shows is those lands being dedicated or future dedication as park, and to take cash in lieu raises questions or procedural questions as to the Local Government Act, whether it was adhered to or not. Second reason we want the application to go back to staff has to do with the park potential or the value of those lands in question. When we look at the lands adjacent to Lang Creek, from a habitat standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, there's value to those lands being in the public hands. When we think of the habitat, Lang Creek is one of the few water courses on the Upper Sunshine Coast that has a salmon run. Culturally, there are signs that there's been human activity on Lang Creek right up to Haslam Lake for thousands of years. And from an environmental standpoint, any lands that are adjacent to a water course, such as Lang Creek, comes with special species of special nature, ones that contribute to the habitat. Again, value to the public, and especially being in the public's hands. So what those lands were identified previously and still are in the OCP, it shows those lands are potentially valuable as parkland. We're not talking a city park, manicured grass, picnic tables, playground, but a nature type park. And we see examples of that. We're working right now, well, Sandy's aware of it, and at the planning committee, we were talking about Emily Lake and the stickleback. Well, right now, it's in the lawyer's hands, but right now there's a development that's adjacent to Emily Lake. And that development is, once it's registered, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, the areas on the north side of Emily Lake will be dedicated as park. Very, very similar to Lang Creek. Right now, on Emily Lake, there is an existing trail. But what that does is gives the public the opportunity, or the public the ability to experience that habitat, to experience the cultural significance of Emily Lake, as well as the environment. Similarly, that could take place with Lang Creek. Having nature park is not new, not just our regional district here on Texada. Just go across the water, Comox. The regional district in Comox has many parks that are called nature parks. Kimberley, small community of Kimberley, now boasts the largest nature park in the province. So for these two reasons, the procedural questions that came up with a decision that is not consistent with the OCP and the value of Land Creek, we encourage the board to put the application back to planning.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for any questions from the board. Seeing no hand, oh, Director Gisborne.
Thank you for coming in, and I won't get into the debate, which I'm sure we're going to have later. If we do move this back to staff, which is very similar to what we did with the other subdivision application on the waterfront side, is there any opportunities potentially for additional parkland and other locations within these projects? Specifically at the end of, I think, Weld Road or something like that. I think I mentioned something along those lines because, of course, folks want to get down to Mahoods. And I'm just wondering if we refer this back to staff, is that something that the developer may be interested in communicating with our staff for options?
Right now, we have meetings scheduled with planning staff for next week. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the landowners as what they're willing to consider, but we do have a meeting to look at both the applications and in particular the parkland question that has come up. So I'm actually being a politician on this and I'm not giving you an answer.
No, that's perfect. As soon as I asked the question, I realized that my question is kind of putting the cart way before the horse. So my apologies. It was just a thought that popped into my mind. Thank you.
Director Southcott.
Thank you for bringing this very interesting information to the board. It makes me wonder, is there likely to be other provincial legislation, particularly targeting conservation or heritage values or other values? And I mean conservation in the broadest sense. Thinking of species, I don't know if there would be any species at risk to be considered, but it sort of opens up a whole lot of other questions for me.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this development will be suspect to an environmental study because of Land Creek. So provincially, anything that is on a water course is suspect to the riparian area regulations. So that would speak to I think to one of your concerns there. And this development will be suspect to that. That being said, because an area is protected under the RAR, it doesn't put it in public hands. So let's say this area in question does not end up going to the public as parkland, and some of the area will be protected under the riparian area regulations, but it will be privately.
Sure.
Culturally speaking, the Heritage Act, developer is working right now to complete the archaeological studies that come under the Heritage Act. And traffic, from my understanding, First Nations traffic does not essentially trigger protected areas, and that's my understanding is what has been that's what I was referring to as cultural value along Land Creek is traffic as a thoroughway. On the properties themselves, there's some smaller areas that have been identified that have First Nation significance, and those areas will be protected under the Heritage Act.
Thank you. Okay, so seeing no other hands, we thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it. I understand we may have one or more unregistered delegations. Two people.
Same delegation.
Oh, same delegation. Okay. Why don't you come on up and well, if it's at the I guess the approval of the board. Does everybody, I guess, mention who you are and what you represent?
We are, I'm Robert Papalia on behalf of Zyrox Mining Company.
I'm Jerry Pepini.
On behalf of the same.
Okay, and is everybody okay with accepting an unregistered delegation? I'm seeing thumbs up, so yeah, come on in. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. We came today to shed a little bit of light on a current application we have before the Ministry of Environment. We've shared with you recently via email and mail an environmental protection notice. This goes out as part of a consultation window for an authorization to discharge from the Ministry of Environment. So we kind of wanted to come and give the board an opportunity to ask questions about if there are any. It was kind of brought to our attention by Director McCormick that there was going to be a discussion today about a potential letter to the ministry regarding this application. So we wanted to kind of give yourselves an opportunity to ask us some questions regarding the project. And also, if you'd like, I can give you just a brief overview of what the application actually means and a little bit of a brief history as well on the sites, if you'd like that.
Well, we've got 4 minutes, so.
Okay, I'll go through it pretty quickly. Also of note is that we've been encouraged by residents of Texada. This is regarding Texada Island and a mining project over there you guys may be familiar with. Spoke on it a number of times over the last couple of years. We've been asked by the residents of Texada to hold a bit of a community meeting town hall to kind of share some more information we have, technical information, and take questions. That's going to be happening next week on Monday in Gillies Bay at the community hall at 7 p.m. So if anybody has any interest to attend that, I wanted to just make that everyone aware of that. So from there, I'll just explain a little bit about what this application is about. This is not in relation to any exploration activities or production. What this is about current discharges that are happening now and have been happening for multiple decades. The site's been operated by a number of different entities over many years with legacy facilities that have been in place for quite some time. So this is about us getting into compliance with the Ministry of Environment now, so that there's an exchange of information going back and forth, i.e. like we're collecting samples at regular intervals and we want to be sharing that data with the Ministry of Environment so they're aware of the situation as it stands on the ground. So this has nothing to do with pending bulk sample application we have in place. That's going to come with its own consultation window and a separate environmental protection notice. So I just wanted to make clear that there's a distinction between these things, that this is really about things that are currently happening and has to do with legacy facilities. From there, I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown of what we've done over the last couple of years. We have endeavored to kind of investigate 2 sites, the Bolivar and the U. The Bolivar is where production historically took place, and there's a tailing storage facility there. The U, this is the mineral prospect where the ore would be generated from, i.e. the source. We have done investigations which entailed the installation of monitoring wells, sampling from surface and said wells, and analytical on these samples, and reports by various QPs on a number of different issues that go into pretty great detail. The findings at both sites kind of have led us to take a course of action over the last couple of years. Our findings at the production facility, the Bolivar, have shown that there's seepage through an unlined embankment of an old tailing storage facility. But the monitoring wells show that there's been negligible impact to groundwater downstream of the site. The water that we've sampled out of those wells is within groundwater, the BC groundwater standard, and supportive of BC water quality for aquatic life. So no real issue there, but we are being asked to authorize that seepage because the Ministry of Environment considers seepage a discharge. It doesn't necessarily have to be discharging from a culvert or pipe. At the U, There are some historic micro pits from exploration from the 90s and early 2000, 2001 to 2 time range. There we did, again, some installation of monitoring wells, and we detected elevated concentrations of copper and zinc directly adjacent to one of the 2 micro pits. So what we did upon discovery of that information, there was a small remaining ore from a number of years ago left in the bottom of that pit. We've removed that, reshaped that facility, lined it, and now you can already see an improvement taking place from that.
Interrupt you just for a moment. It's okay with the board that we continue for another 5 minutes? Okay.
I don't need that much more.
Well, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. So from there now we have one of the 2 micro pits at the U has a liner within it, and there is a segregation between the 2 ponds, so that the one with the liner has a culvert discharging to the ground. It's exfiltrating to ground. That one is basically discharging rainwater. The unlined pit on the north side is collecting runoff, and there that one has seepage going to ground. There we do a little bit of lime treatment, basically in the seasonal lows during the summer. The quality degrades. Seepage also drops off because there's not a lot of water generated, and the level in the pond drops down to below where these fissures are. So we do a bit of treatment there to adjust pH, drop suspended solids, and make sure that that quality is sufficient to be able to be discharged. So we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to control the situation there, collect data so we can make informed decisions to modify the site to offer more protection to the receiving environment. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the current situation and why we've done what we've done over the last few years, and a little bit about what this EPN means. I think I'll stop there and just open it up to questions.
Okay, sounds good. Do we have any questions? I assume Director McCormick's going to have some. Yes, there she is. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. I think you've answered a number of my questions already. But I do have a couple of questions still. And what you're saying then is the discharge from the U mine is primarily seepage? Is that what you're saying?
There's 2 discharges. There are 2 micro pits on site, one lined, one unlined. The lined pond is isolated from the unlined pond. So the water within the lined pond is rainfall. That's discharging via culvert to ground through a little exfiltration basin. On the north pit, micro pit side, that one has seepage going to ground. And there, when water quality deteriorates, we perform some treatment with lime addition.
Okay.
And that isn't a frequently occurring activity. This is biannually, potentially. That's about it.
Okay. So monitoring is going on. Is there any way the public can better understand what's going on by having access to that monitoring, to those results? I think that would help clear up a lot of information and misinformation that's going around if the public could actually see what those results were.
Yeah, it's absolutely our intent next week to get more technical data up on a screen and actually share mapping, some analytical, and give people the information that they would like to see. We actually, the whole thing here is this is about transparency. We're trying to get in compliance with the Ministry of Environment. They have stringent regulations, and they're well aware of what we're doing because there's been a back and forth dialogue with them going on for many months now. So they've seen all of our technical information, and they have a level of comfort with the information we provided them, the course of action we've taken. I mean, this is more like the opportunity. We want to get the public back up to speed and obviously all the other affected parties in the area.
Okay.
Okay, are the, if I may, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Is the monitoring done by someone on staff with Zyrox, or is this an independent hydrologist, or who is it that's doing the testing?
Yeah, it's a gentleman in Comox who has his own business, environmental monitoring business.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, Chair, one of the main concerns that has been expressed to me by people who live in the area is what is actually in the discharge. And does it pose any risk to the very sensitive habitat that exists, the stickleback pears and of course the western bearded turtle, but the main concern is the stickleback pears. What they're telling me, what residents in the area are telling me, is that under certain conditions, when you get the atmospheric rivers together with the huge runoff, you can get a lot of water that flows from Priest Lake down to Venanda Creek, down to Emily Lake, through the creek again, out to the ocean. But there's a bit of a bottleneck where it goes through the bottom part of the creek, and the water levels can in fact back up and flow backwards because of the high volume of water that isn't able to get down the creek, as expeditiously as it should. So the concern is that this, whatever is in the discharge can be going back and harming the habitat areas for these species. So what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, Jerry, go ahead.
I mean, Sandy, I think firstly, the discharges are not going to Priest Lake. We have information that we'll be sharing with the public next week to show that. So the way that the discharge is happening is through seepage to groundwater. And in the groundwater system, it attenuates. And our monitoring data shows that 50 meters down gradient of where of these old micro pits, the concentrations they meet groundwater standards for the protection of aquatic life. And at that location, they are approximately 200 meters from Venanda Creek. So I don't think that the Venanda Creek would be backing up for 200 meters with an elevation difference of probably, 10 to 15 meters at least in that location. I think the backup that happens is in those lowland, swampy areas where that may happen when you get atmospheric rivers and you get a very high flow going through it. But that, in fact, what would happen, what our information says is that when there's a lot of rain around, that's when the water quality is best because there's so much dilution in the system. It's in the summer and when the flows are low that there's an issue with water quality, at least that we see at the mine site, because there's no rainfall. It's just seepage that's coming from the ore zone, which is exposed at the U.
One more follow-up?
Yes, thank you. And I promise this will be the last one. Where the U mine is, it discharges into the Venanda watershed. And of course, watersheds are precious. And as the stewards of those watersheds, we as local government have to take every precaution necessary as stipulated in our OCP, to protect any potential harm to the watershed. The fact that it is discharging within the watershed is of great concern. And that is, I guess, I can't be convinced that there isn't some harm being done to the watershed as a result of this work. So is there any final comment you can give me about that?
I mean, Zyrox also appreciates the sensitivity of the setting and the current situation, and we'll be showing our monitoring results, our modeling results, and our mine plan to the community. And we're convinced that the plan is protective and we can do a project which protects the environment. So, Mother Nature is very protective and has its own mechanisms that ensure that, systems are invigorated or systems survive. And I think when we put up that information, that monitoring information, you'll be quite surprised. So, I invite you to come to the meeting. I hope you'll be there and we can discuss the data as opposed to the actual concept or the beliefs. We'll actually have the data to show as opposed to people's ideas about how things work. So we look forward to having a discussion in more detail there. Okay.
Thank you.
You have your hand up?
I did, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. So I have a couple of questions. One is, there are tailings ponds that have been pre-existing things. So is your application for replacement of an existing discharge permit that has expired, or is there a new application for discharge that you had not expected?
There is a discharge permit from back in the early 2000s. So that is a kind of an amendment, if you like, or a reissuing of that, because back then a bulk sample, a partial bulk sample was collected but not completed. So there was a discharge permit from 2002,
2001, 2002.
So there is an existing one. Yeah.
And the existing permit isn't sufficient to cover off the actual discharge that's happening? Is that why you need a new one?
No, it's lapsed.
Lapsed, okay.
Needs to be brought into current.
And updated to the existing situation, which is...
It's the same discharge that was occurring then.
Okay. So my other question had been, have you read the OCP and included any information about anything that might be inconsistent with the OCP and the information you're planning to share with people in your meeting next week?
We haven't really.
I've looked at the OCP. I mean, we realized that the
because people are going to want to know how it fits with the OCP.
The lease area, but you know, Zyrox has had a lease in that area, an active lease for over 20 years, and the company was not consulted when the OCP was developed either. So, you know, back into your court, there was an onus on the district to consult with existing stakeholders, and that didn't happen. So, you know, this is
like what we're trying to do now is have a dialogue and go through this consultation phase and advertise.
Right. So moving forward from where we're at today, you have a lease, we have an OCP, both legitimate folks.
Okay.
If you want to challenge the OCP, I guess you could do that, but we have to pay attention. We're legally required to pay attention to our OCP to make our job easier. You could discuss how the OCP and your plan are consistent or inconsistent, or provide some discussion points around that would make regulatory decision-making more consistent and together.
Yeah. I mean, Zyrox has reached out to the community there and said, well, we're quite happy to actually constitute a working group to look at reclamation and monitoring and
try and create a common set of objectives in regards to the Emily Lake Park expansion
and reclamation as a park as requested by or as indicated in the OCP. But we've had no comeback on that. So, you know, the offer still is out there. We're happy to discuss closure planning and closure objectives with the district and with the local community.
So I'm a municipal director, so I don't know that I necessarily have a lot of influence, but I have worked in regulatory industries a lot. I worked out for Alberta Environment, BC Forestry, and I'm just suggesting the process for decision-making for folks who have to do that in government. It does fall out easier if the conversation does address all of the various plans and how they interact. And so take that for what you would.
Yeah, thank you. Take it, thank you.
Okay, great. Back to Director McCormick.
Thank you.
Just for our question period of time, so if you can make it quick, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's about our OCP. Just to inform the delegate that, in fact, there were 43 stakeholder surveys returned, 206 community surveys. There were open houses, public presentations, community workshops, and advisory committee meetings. So I'm not sure how many of those you attended, but we did not hear, you know, a presentation from you, though one would have been most welcome. There was a member of our committee that represented the mining industry, and so they were at the table in that sense. So the integrity of our OCP, I stand behind that. We've had many opportunities for everyone to participate.
Thanks for your comments.
That's it, Chair.
Before you leave, can you just give us a repeat of when and where the information session will be? And I'm curious as to where it's going to be advertised.
Perhaps Director McCormick could answer where it's going to be advertised, because I think she's taken the lead on this.
Okay.
But it's going to be Monday, April 14th at 7 p.m. in the Gillies Bay Community Hall.
Great.
I'm not sure if advertisement was just via email circulation. I haven't received an actual formal invite other than a phone call.
Oh, okay. Director McCormick, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I'm not one of the organizers. I was asked if I would be the moderator of the evening, and I've agreed to do that. But I believe the organizers have posted it on the Texada message board on Facebook, and also are putting posters up around the island. So that's as much as I know.
Great. Okay, well, I'll get the word out. Thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Assuming there are no other unregistered delegates?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I believe we have one more.
Oh, really? Okay.
Unregistered delegation.
Okay.
Very hollow.
Sure. Is everybody okay with another unregistered delegation?
I
think it's same topic, yeah. So we have thumbs up from everybody. I saw some. Yeah, everybody's cool. Okay, great. Ms. Hollow?
Hello. Thank you for accepting me as unregistered. I'm Teresa Hollow. I live in Van Anda on Texada Island. I've been working on the park expansion as per the OCP for about 15 years now. I've been with Texada Island Recreation Commission, and I have been a Van Anda Improvement District trustee for 2 terms. I've coming before today to stress the point that different datas have come to my attention presented by Zyrox. They have a huge monetary gain and loss on this project. And I feel sometimes their data and information can be vague. As in today, I would have thought they would have had some hard numbers to present to you, keeping in mind that this project is only in the first staging area, and the effluent discharge that is being monitored is from one that is not an active working mine. Anything previous that has been leaking and seepage over the last years has been owned and worked on by Zyrox, but they only continue to bring up to environmental standards when they are required to. One of the questions, and it's a huge question, is there are 2. First, where does the water drain? I believe the water from the mine, they've already said it does go in to the bottom of Priest Lake, meaning that's divided by the road that leads from Gillies Bay to Van Anda into what is locally known as the Priest Lake, I can't think of it, sorry, or the Turtle Pond. But they have said it will go into the Turtle Pond. There is a culvert under the road. It is at the same elevation, and certain maps are very vague about the actual distance of whether that area is in the watershed or not. It's all at the same level. It is controlled by a dam. So at certain times it is, and the water does flow back through the culvert into Priest Lake. Arguably, it may not be very much, but it does, and Zyrox says up and down, it does not. From a drinking water assessment report from Alluvia Environmental Services of July 2014, potential impact on water source is difficult to assess within Priest Lake watershed. There are fractures, solution channels, mine shafts, tailing piles, contaminants that can flow rapidly without filtration. We have a huge responsibility as from the OCP to watch over and protect this area. Allowing any effluent or pollution into this area is detrimental. We don't have the figures and we don't have the facts. in Priest Lake, in the Emily Lake area, which is downstream of Priest Lake, many ponds and surface shallow areas. There is the old Copper Queen mine, which was abandoned years and years ago. It is still seeping slowly into the Emily Lake area with a huge area of deadfall, and nothing grows there. It should be cleaned up, but hasn't. Because this area has been totally abused over the years of mine seepage, logging, road, and culverts, it is an extreme sensitivity to having any more added to it. As a community, we cannot afford to be allowing more effluent pollution of any kind. Right now, it's just the mine isn't being worked. When it does start to be worked, what is the factor? Atmospheric rivers, what is the factor? I can't stress hard enough that the data is just not there. They don't have, it's not a big corporation like Lafarge. Lafarge in the past has had seepage that have gone near the area of Priest Lake and have immediately taken steps costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in new lined and settling ponds as the height of land around Priest Lake is changed by mining. There is a huge threat there. If something happens at the Zyrox mines, then it would be very hard for Zyrox to immediately pull up, like Lafarge companies, who are respected companies on this island, who don't have the funds to build $1 million settling ponds and prevent the seepage into Priest Lake. It is Van Anda's only drinking watershed. The whole area has been set aside by the OCP. I urge you, Area 6.2, to say no effluent, no discharge should ever be allowed. To add it to the stickleback, which you've heard earlier, how endangered that is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Do we have any questions from the directors? Director Elliott.
Thank you. Teresa, do you know of any initiatives for monitoring and gathering data outside of what the mining companies are doing?
Right now, Priest Lake and Lafarge on that side have been monitoring the drinking water levels of contaminants. Although the Van Anda Improvement District currently has not updated their website for the public, whether that exists, I do not know.
Any other questions today from the directors? Seeing none, we thank you for presenting to us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's the end of the unregistered.
Yes.
Moving on to no unfinished business. We have 4 items of correspondence. Does anybody want to pull any of those items to be the business dealt with them? Dr. Fall.
Muted.
Muted.
I'd like to pull item 6.1, but refer it to our in-camera meeting.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was struggling with that one too, and I'm glad somebody else figured out how to do that.
Okay. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, sir. I'm just jumping back and forth here between screens. 6.3.
Okay. I guess if that's it, we'll move on to business arising from correspondence. So it's just 7.1, which is the former 6.3. You'd like to address that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. As you can see from the report, there's an opportunity here for some funding for a different delivery model for naloxone, which is a really important drug to reverse opiate effects. And as Director Southcott well knows, some types of delivery models can be a little bit dangerous for people in certain situations and a little bit hard to use. So I guess I have a question for our staff. Is there any need for our staff to take advantage of this program and use some of those funds for our staff that may be required to administer.
Officer, do you have a comment on that? Or?
It's probably for Mr. Toms, but.
Sure. Go to Mr. Toms then.
Probably provide a bit of an answer to that through the chair. I did read the letter, and just as a bit of background, our QRD volunteer fire departments are no stranger to using naloxone, but the injectable kind, and this one's obviously referencing nasal. We've had only preliminary conversations among some of our volunteer first responders and the nasal naloxone. It's not entirely clear to me yet whether this program, it does reference fire departments, although prior to seeing this letter, we were aware of nasal naloxone, and it seemed that it was accessible to fire departments prior to this. So I'm not sure if this necessarily relates or not. That was a little bit different to us under the current FR regulations. So beyond that, I haven't looked into this further. It is suggesting communities, are looking at community halls, et cetera. It kind of reminds me of the AED programs that came out 10 plus years ago, but that would probably take a bigger discussion as to whether that was something that, we could support or that this board wanted to direct.
Thanks. Through the chair, I was also thinking that there could possibly be some of our staff that may be coming in contact with people in the community that might be related, but I just ask you keep it on your radar. So much appreciated. Thanks. Just want to take advantage of any of those opportunities, especially if it's easier and safer to administer.
Very much. We'll move on then. So, as the corporate officer pointed out, we have no chair's report, no director's reports. We do have a consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull any items from said consent agenda?
Yes, Chair.
Dr. Gisborne.
I would like to pull 10.4, 10.6, and 10.9.
Okay. Anybody else?
Is that include the one where the delegate wanted us to send stuff back to staff? Yes.
10.6.
10.6. Okay, so seeing no other hands, would somebody like to move the remainder of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Seconded by Southcott. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so we're going to the new 11.1, which is the former 10.4.
I'll move the motion to get it on the floor.
Okay. Motion's been moved. It's been seconded by Director McCormick. And I assume Director Gisborne, you'd like to speak to it?
Yes, we got some correspondence that has been referred to an in-camera discussion. I'm wondering if maybe we should refer 10.4 to an in-camera discussion. My mind right now is the letter that we got doesn't really affect my decision on the motion, which is to write a letter of concern to the Director of Environmental Protection. The reason why I'm in favor of this motion is, we got the letter, Zyrox Mining Company Ltd. Environmental Protection Notice. And reading that letter, there's not a lot of meat to it. There's not a lot of information. Like, there's not even a map. And maybe it's the nerdiness of me, but I love information. I love to see, like, what are kind of the monitoring wells showing? Where is this specifically located? And that's where, convince me to say yes. Convince me to say, hey, I'm okay with this. But with what I have before me, I have concerns. And I think if I had more information, those concerns might be alleviated. I heard the delegation, and my understanding, on Texada is there's a lot of deactivated mines. Those are currently leaking and leaching into the groundwater. And if a company is at least taking responsibility of one of these old sites and is trying to revitalize it or something, it has the potential to go both ways. It might be like cracking the seal and putting more contaminants into the area, or there's money behind it to actually try and fix up what the problem is. So myself, I'm in favor of this motion of sending a letter of concern, though there is, the in-camera item, so I'm not sure if we want to refer this to the in-camera discussion, but myself, without all that extra information, I have concerns, and I like maps, I like data, because I'm kind of nerdy.
Okay. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I also support the recommendation, and the reason why is because I look at Texada's OCP, which is right there, and under 2.3.1 community watershed, it states to protect, and this is under our objectives, the number one is to protect community watersheds from contamination. That is why I think a letter of concern is appropriate. The applicant admits that this site is within our watershed. Our role is to protect community watersheds from contamination. In writing to the province, we would merely alert them to the fact that this is within our watershed. We are concerned about protection and that we expect every effort will be made to continue to protect this environmentally sensitive area. So that's why I support the motion. Whatever discussion we have in camera, I think will be unrelated to expressing our need to defend our watershed.
Okay.
That's
Very
it.
much. Director Elliott?
Thank you. I wouldn't be, I almost think that postponing this decision for a little while until at least after the Texada meeting might be a good idea. And here's why I think that. If we're to write a letter and we could be specific in that letter about the kinds of things that we need to protect our watershed, it would be a more powerful and useful letter. Currently, there is some gaps in the information that make it difficult for us to be specific about what to put in the letter. And it might be helpful to hear what comes forward from the meeting in order to guide some of what we want to put in the letter. So there are a couple of different ways that objecting to a permit can make it worse for the environment. Because a permit for discharge can set levels and requirements for monitoring and what to do if levels are exceeding what was in the permit. Without a permit, you don't have that protection. And so permitting discharges tends to be an elevated level of protection for the environment than just having no permit. And so I want to make sure that when we send a letter about our concerns, that they're actionable and we're able to include them within the regulatory process. That's my so delaying writing this letter until we have more information or can do a better job of identifying the information we need might be to our advantage.
Are you making a motion to postpone?
I'm leaving it, it's Sandy's Island. I'm just giving my very best advice.
Okay, Director McCormick, I see your hand up.
There is
Actually,
a
you know what, I
deadline.
see Director Lennox's hand up and you've spoken already. So we'll go to you after Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Director McCormick. Just quickly, I support both of these ideas from Director Elliott. Really, we need more information. I think the whatever process we do, it's weak, right? The information that we have. Our initial motion, I think, is still true. We have concerns, but I think if we can get some more information, that might alleviate some concerns. I also agree. Our concerns stem from the fact, even more from the presentation, that that area is not in compliance. And they stated a couple of times they're trying to get to compliance. So I think we should acknowledge that effort, that a company that historically hasn't been in compliance is now working towards compliance. And we need to actually embed that in our response, that we expect compliance. So, that's my opinion. So, currently there's been a long term of seepage here. And so we need, like Director Elliott said, we need to continue that movement towards better monitoring and remediation, but get more information. So I would like to refer this to next month's meetings. Hopefully we get some more out of the public meeting, and I'll let Director McCormick suggest something.
Hey, go ahead, Director McCormick.
Thank you. There is a deadline. Submissions have to be received by the province by April 30th. We have one more board meeting in April on the 29th. So that is rather cutting it a little close to expect after a board meeting that staff will get that out first thing the next day. So our timeline is very tight. I don't disagree with what you're saying. More information, the better. But, to write basically a commentary that we support the integrity of our watershed, and we want to make sure that, anything that is being discharged up to 470 cubic meters a day, they say, doesn't sound like seepage. In any case, we're just standing up for our watershed and making sure that government is aware of this, and that compliance is important. So the timing is so tight. I don't know how we could defer it.
Good point.
Because of ABRCC, that messes up our meeting schedule. So everything is now the 29th and 30th of April.
Director Southcott?
Thank you, Chair. This brings a question up for me because I appreciate Director Elliott's points and the discussion we've had. If we are to send this letter to the ministry, which I at this point support, is it possible, or are they open to receiving supplemental information at a later date that would have influence, given that the deadline is April 30th? It's a question for staff, if staff might have an idea about that. I believe in Director Elliott.
I don't know if the staff would have an idea about that. I imagine not.
Yeah, I don't think we could probably provide a response after the meeting. Just need a little bit more time
To look into that. I had Director Gisborne. He hasn't spoken yet. Then we'll go to you, Director Gisborne.
Oh, I was the first speaker of this motion.
Oh, okay. That's right. Why weren't you? So we could go to Director Elliott then.
Okay.
Your hand was up first.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little confused. No, you spoke once or twice or
once.
Once. Okay. Well, let's go back to Director Gisborne.
Okay, I'm just taking a look at the letter that we received, and it says any person who may be adversely affected by the current discharge and wishes to provide relevant information may, within 30 days after the last date of posting, publishing service, yada, yada, yada. And then it says dated this 19th day of March 2025. So when I read that, I'm thinking, like, does that mean the deadline's the 18th? Is that even closer? And just to go back to the original motion, the motion is to send a letter saying that we have concerns. It's not a letter saying that we're opposed. It's saying that we have concerns. And we may get more information. My big concern is if we do end up being past the deadline and there becomes kind of a fight over it where it's like, well, we submitted a letter too late to have it considered. That's where I'm not entirely in favor of postponing this motion, because I am concerned about how tight that deadline is. And back to the original motion, this is a letter of concern. It's not a letter of opposition or a letter of support. If it was a letter of opposition, I would say, hey, hold on, I need more information to oppose it. But I also need more information to support it. And that's where I think a letter of concern is the right way to go forward, to say, hey, we're concerned and we need more information before we will, give a thumbs up or be comfortable and sleep well at night knowing that people's drinking water is protected. That's my thoughts, but maybe I got the date wrong, because it says, of course, after the last date of posting, so maybe there was another posting later on.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So we want to, I think I'm in favor of the motion moving forward with a letter. I think we want to spell out in the letter that we are impacted, and we point out our official community plan and what it says, and that the discharge does happen within that watershed that is part of the official community plan, that we must, so therefore we are adversely impacted. And we have concerns about protecting the watershed, and any permit issued ought to consider measures for monitoring and setting limits and so forth that are protected, that will protect the watershed. And I think we want to spell that out in any letter that we write. Our concern is protecting the watershed. So any permit that's given ought to improve and protect the watershed. And so that would be our interest. And so it isn't about supporting the permit or not supporting the permit. It's about what we want in the permit. We want the Ministry of Environment to put limits, to put requirements for monitoring, all of the things that need to be in a permit in order to have any enforcement. And so I don't know who we get to write that letter, but we want it to use the words that are within the legislation to make sure that they understand this is what we're looking for.
Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments. One, and I support the motion as well, and I'll back it up in a moment. I just want to refer to the amount of discharge. 470 cubic meters per day is actually 470,000 liters. I don't consider that a particularly tiny amount. It's not a huge amount. Rivers flow a lot more than that, but it's not a minuscule amount. It's not an eyedropper either. I think the motion of writing, expressing our concerns, I don't think we need to do more technical work. I mean, if we have an opportunity for a follow-up in a month, if there's time, or after the meeting, that would seem fine if that's appropriate. But I think sending a letter to express concerns is totally appropriate. It's not, as has been pointed out, it doesn't mean opposition, it means concerns. And those concerns can be, what I would suggest is that the letter refer, in addition to what Director Elliott just mentioned, but I think referring to the OCP in particular. So it's really, the concerns are embedded in the OCP, and I concur with Director McCormick. The OCP was done properly and legitimately and legally. And those concerns are the community's concerns and values, and they can be referred to. And really, it's just telling the Ministry of Environment, or asking them, or advocating for them to make sure those concerns are taken into account. And if the permit can be issued while taking those concerns as expressed in the OCP into account, well, then fine. And it could be a positive thing, and it could improve the conditions there. If they cannot be, well then, and if the Ministry of Environment makes another choice, well, that's their option too. They need to do, we're asking them to uphold our OCP more or less. And I think that's the main content of the letter should be that. And I think regardless of what technical information came out in the future, that, I think that's just it doesn't change. I mean, our concerns about upholding the values in the OCP remain regardless. And if the mining operation and permit and uses and so on all are improving things and upholding those concerns and making things better, well then great.
Okay, great. I think we've reached a consensus here. At least it sounds like that going around the table. So I think we can probably move forward with the motion. We have a mover, we have a second. We've had a lot of discussion at this point. All of the comments that have been made here have been recorded. So when this letter comes out, we can refer to this to get the contents of the letter. So I'm just going to call the question now. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carried. Great. 10.6, which is now 11.2. Director Gisborne.
Oh, you're muted.
Muted.
Or your audio is not coming through.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to push the button on my headset. My bad. I was going to move that this item be referred to staff, similar to the other application that we had on the other side of the highway.
Second.
Seconded by Director Lennox. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
I'll just be really quick. I'll just say that at the planning committee, when I voted, I believe the statement was, okay, moved similar to the previous motion. And I actually thought I was voting on referring it to staff. So when I saw this on the agenda and after our planning committee, I was planning to move it to staff anyways, because I have a lot of similar thoughts and concerns in relation to, procedural fairness and opportunities. And, when a developer is offering parkland, it is something that I think that we should, be really taking seriously. And hearing that the developer is going to be speaking with our planning staff next week regarding the other property, I figure, what is it they say? The economies of scale. Like, let's have them look at both. So I'm in favor of referring this one to staff as well and hearing what comes of it.
Okay. Any other comments?
It's like you get a vote, right? It says A, B, C, D.
It's a planning committee.
Planning committee. So no other comments. I'll call the question. All in favor? Unanimous. Passes. Remind me, what was the third one we pulled?
10.9.
10.9. Okay. 10.9 is now 11.3.
And I'll move it.
Okay. Seconded by Director Lennox. Yeah, Director Gisborne.
Yes, I pulled this one. I know that puts it at risk. I'm very much in favor of having this move forward. But my question is related to, I've heard some feedback. I've talked to some other elected officials. And if we move forward with, the recommendation is to have it go for first and second reading. And then after first and second reading, we hear back from the public. I'm thinking of a previous staff report where we talked about being able to use floor area ratio as part of a zoning bylaw, would we need to put that in the draft bylaw before it goes to the public? Or if the public wants something like that, are we able to do that amendment at a later date? Or is that something we got to do on the front end? Sorry, I'm kind of new to this. And my first question was going to be, is Laura Rodden around? And I see that she is. So I believe Laura has the expertise to answer my question.
Okay, Ms. Rodden?
Through the chair, I believe that, I mean, this resolution is about this bylaw, and this amending bylaw does not have anything in there about floor area ratio. So I don't think you can do both with this bylaw unless you want to go and consult with the Nooka Street neighborhood about changes to the bylaw in a more general way and talk about different things. This is just focused on allowing an accessory dwelling unit on every parcel.
Yes, this is allowing, this is a proposal to allow an accessory dwelling unit on every parcel. And that's where one of the things I've heard from some residents is, does an accessory dwelling unit potentially mean that people can build two massive homes? As I understand, as long as one's bigger than the other one, the answer to that question is yes. And, we have another application where we do put a restriction on the total floor area of the accessory dwelling unit. And I've kind of heard from some folks that have said, like, well, could we say, yes, you can have two, like the accessory dwelling unit, and on the condition that it doesn't, like, both of them don't exceed something like 6,000 square feet or like 500 and something square meters because we're metric. So I'm just wondering, do we need to put that in the front end, I guess? And that's kind of where my thoughts are.
Rodden?
Through the chair, I think that if this proceeds, then the next step would be to, prepare a notice, send the bylaw to the public, invite them to a public meeting, because under the Coffet Regional District's communications policy, if we're doing something new or different, we engage with the public. And when it's reviewed with the public, they may have suggestions, but we can't presuppose what those suggestions may be. Maybe some residents, like you say, will say, should we put a limit on the size of the dwelling? But this bylaw doesn't do that. So, but I think we can't presuppose what the public is going to say.
Right.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we can support this, and if the public come in and say they want to go one way or the other, then we can move forward based on that information at that time.
Sounds that way.
Perfect. In that case, I am ready to vote.
Other comments? Seeing none, on the question, all in favor? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to resolutions. New street zoning amendment bylaw. 321.2, 2025. How do we wish to deal with this? We need a mover and a seconder, so it's areas A, B, C, and D. I mean, I'll move it.
I'll second.
Gisborne seconds. Thank you. Any discussion? Dr. Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm actually more inclined this meeting to support this bylaw than the last meeting with some potential minor amendments. The first, very simple, the proposed amending bylaw says one additional dwelling unit having a floor area no greater than 1,200 square feet. I would like to see that as square meters because we are in Canada. We use metric. So if we can do that as an amendment, that would make me very happy. And the second question or the other thing that I would kind of like to see is this amending bylaw only applies to one property. It puts a limit on the floor area of the accessory dwelling unit, but it makes no restriction on the floor area of the primary unit. So in the future, the primary unit could be built to essentially any size. And to me, that would have a bit of a concern around, future septic and things like that. So that's kind of the two things is if we could have it change to square meters and maybe increase the amount so that it includes both the primary and the secondary. And with that, I would be happy to support it. So I guess my question, I was going to ask Ms. Rodden, would that require us to refer it to staff to make those minor changes with board direction, or is it too much of a change to go from square feet to square meters?
Well, you've asked two questions here. I mean, the one, square feet and including what the equivalent is in square meters, I imagine that's probably a very simple thing to change. The other aspect is quite different. So if Ms. Rodden wants to comment on that.
Through the chair, yes, I can answer the question in that, I mean, we could add quite simply in brackets after 1,200 square feet, we could put in brackets what it is in meters if you would like. The reason it's quoted in square feet is because that is what the septic filing was for. And the septic filing specifies the square feet of the dwelling, which is the accessory dwelling unit. So that's where that number came from. It's specific to this parcel. And I will say, if the other bylaw goes through, if it's supported by the community, then this will be moot because this will be replaced by the next amending bylaw. But I mean, that is a simple change. I guess we could calculate that right now, and the board could consider endorsing it as amended.
And to the second part of his question?
Well, the second part of the question, there's nothing in the zoning bylaw that regulates the size of a dwelling unit on a parcel. And this bylaw came about because an applicant applied to rezone to permit the accessory dwelling unit on their parcels. So it's kind of comparing apples and oranges. There's nothing in the bylaw right now that regulates the size of a principal dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
The number I've got is 112 square meters, which is 1,200 square feet calculated.
Okay, well, I think a simple amendment, I don't know that we really need to make a motion on that, to just include the metric equivalent of 1,200 square meters. Is that?
Yep.
Okay? Right. All right. All right, so if there are no other comments, I'm going to say we're going to vote on this motion with the assumption that we'll have the metric equivalent of 1,200 square feet included in brackets after.
Okay.
Any other questions about this? I'd like to vote on it. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Bylaws. 14.1 Development Services Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 477.3 2025. Who'd like to read that?
I'll jump in. I'll move that the board give first and second reading of Development Services Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 477.3 2025.
This is A, B, C, and D unweighted. So seconded by Director McCormick. Thank you. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Carries.
And I'll move that the board give third reading of Development Services Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 477.3 2025.
Seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? All in favor? Carries.
And I'll move that the board adopt Development Services Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 477.3 2025.
Seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Motion carries. That's all done. 14.2. Would somebody like to read that? This is all directors. Director Elliott.
I move that the board give first and second reading of the 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 595.2 2025.
Seconded by Director Southcott. Any discussion? None. Oh, Director Elliott.
So this is our amendment of things we've already done throughout the year to bring it all up to speed. Is that correct?
That's from what I understand, yes.
Yes, thank you. This is the item that was discussed at Finance Committee today.
Any other hands up? None. Okay, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
I move that the board give third reading of 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 595.2, 2025.
Seconded by Director Southcott. Discussion? None, all in favor? Unanimous.
I move that the board adopt 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 595.2, 2025.
Seconded by Director Southcott. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. All right, 14.3, again, all directors weighted vote. Who would like to do that one?
I just keep reading.
Go for it. You're doing a good job.
Thank you. I move that the board give first and second reading of the 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 600.1, 2025.
Seconded by Director Southcott. Discussion? No hands, all in favor? Carries.
I move that the board give third reading of 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 600.1, 2025.
Seconded by Director Southcott. Discussion? None, all in favor? Unanimous.
I move that the board adopt 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 600.1, 2025.
Seconded again, Director Southcott. Discussion? None, all in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. New business 15.1. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move a very slight amendment to this motion, and I'll read it out so that everyone's on the same page. I'll move that the board express its interest. I move that the board expresses its intent to meet with the Powell River City Council to discuss 2025 financial contributions to the Powell River Recreation Complex. And with a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Hey, Director Lennox.
Yeah. So this is, I know there might be a little confusion because we have a service review that's going on and we've got recommendations coming before our upcoming committee of the whole meeting. The service review, in my opinion, is more for the long term, what we're doing with the recreation service that we have. At March's Finance Committee meeting, we postponed contributing our 2025 financial amount, which I think was about $240,000 for the recreation complex to the city of Powell River. The reason I added that 2025 was this motion is to signify our intent to say, hey, council, we want to meet with you to talk about 2025's financial contribution. And if this motion passes, I believe it should be up to the chair to decide how that can transpire, whether the chair wants to send a letter, an email, or go in person as a delegation, or offer to send another one of the three directors to go and invite council to come and just kind of start the ball rolling on, hey, let's discuss the 2025 financial contribution. And there's going to be more discussions to come, as the service review continues to play out. But I'm pretty sure the city of Powell River is eagerly awaiting the $240,000 that we now have allocated in our budget. And by passing this motion, I think it can give everyone a bit of peace of mind to just say, hey, we do want to move forward on this because we have a postponed resolution from our finance committee last month. And that was the intent for putting this before us. However, if the other two directors of area A and C feel that this is premature, they can put forward a motion to postpone it until we have the more in-depth discussion of our service review, which I believe comes up at the end of the month. But myself, I think, we can get moving on 2025 by actually starting that dialogue. That's just my thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any comments? None. I mean, I have a comment. I'm not sure if putting 2025 in there is necessary. I think we could probably meet with them and it gives us the flexibility to discuss future years at that point. If we put 2025, then it only limits us to 2025. And I don't know that it's really necessary. We can kind of decide what we want to discuss at the meeting if we leave it vague and just say discuss financial contributions. So I guess I'd be more inclined to just do it without the date.
If you put forward an amendment to remove 2025, I'll happily support it, Chair.
All right, well, I'll take out the 20. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
You guys could agree to not have that in there. If
Okay.
you didn't want to go through the whole procedure.
Sure.
Certainly.
Are you all okay with that? I mean, it's just A, B, and C, so, all right.
Sounds good.
All right, great. So if there's no other discussion, I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Director Lennox.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was going to make a comment before yours, but I just appreciate, let's move ahead, right? It's time to meet. It's time to get moving, get some certainty for the city for this year, and then carry on in the future. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. No other comment. I'll call the question. Yes, Director Elliott.
So I know I don't have a vote on the thing, but I do wanted to support the motion and let people know that I'm really happy the motion's coming forward so that we can have the meeting. I do think it is more flexible without the date in there, so I'm happy you decided on that. And those are my comments.
Okay, great. And I'll call the question. See no other hands. All in favor? Passes. Question period. There's nobody here, but Mr. Galinsky, are you online?
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I am online. My one question relates to the third delegation, the two gentlemen from Zyrox. I didn't catch their names. I'm hoping that perhaps the corporate officer could email those to me or something along those lines.
I'm sure she will.
I thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to pose questions. That was it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Galinsky. Have a nice day. And we have an in-camera session. So would somebody like to read that for us?
I'll jump in because I've got the amendment as well from Michelle Jones.
Yeah, so, sorry, Director Gisborne. I've sent Director Gisborne the wording.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'll move that the board move in camera and that the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the regional district. K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of the board, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. And N, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
We have a seconder, Director Southcott. Thank you. Any discussion? None? All in favor? Carries. We're going in camera.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we are back from the in-camera session. There is no rise in report, so we've reached the end of our agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. See you guys.
See y'all in Nanaimo.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you.
See you later in the week. I mean, bye.
Yeah.